Thank you for your attention so far. Oh, thank you, Emma, for being here. Zoom, hopefully you're still doing well. I would like to give you a chance, especially for the two of you, Onome or Guillermo, just to respond to what you heard. What is on your mind, just freely?
So is this on? Yes. It is? Oh, okay. So my name is Onome, and I am currently in the middle of the vocal. I'm in the middle of the river. I'm in the middle of all the way in with Rhiannon. And so it's really interesting to hear from your perspective as someone who completed that program, how you see the bigger picture of the self, the social, and then the macro social, like how they all feed into each other. I was really appreciating you sharing that.
Oh my God, so many strands opening at the same time. I'm interested in individual, collective, and social, and how the work that one can do on oneself can transform the way we interact with others and can ultimately bring some change on a wider level. And for me, it depends on what values are behind it and how we approach that. So if we work on the individual person, trying to make them more special, more different, more capable in a certain area, that's going to isolate and to generate some kind of separation. But if what was taught was how to connect and how to relate and how to respond, that would be a different story. And that's why I probably think that CBI and improvisation in general can be so potent, because what, from my experience, we are exploring and sharing is different ways to connect with each other and with ourselves and with the environment. And in exploring these different ways, possibly we are flexing more muscles of individual and social change that we know about.
Thank you. So I would actually like to ask Erwan for a definition of social change as you see it, just so that we're actually clear of where we're coming from in this perspective.
Social change for me is actually from this perspective, I was like, first of all, if you go to school and we're trying to convince you that the model we're living in is the only option, and the fact that we have to constrain who we are in order to fit in. I remember what you said earlier on, like the idea of, because Brené Brown is talking about fitting in and belonging, and what is the difference between the two of them? And fitting in is that basically you're going to do everything you can to fit in the society by putting masks on you, and then being like, oh, I fit in, but it doesn't mean that you're happy. And belonging is just more like about developing your creativity, belonging your, who you are deep inside. And I have the sense that if we're talking about social change, it means that it has to relate to the population in general and not necessarily in the little pockets of people. But we need a little bit of pockets of people to explore. We explore, and then we can maybe share with others. So that's how I perceive it.
And belonging is also about authenticity, right? And trust and all these other things that we were
Absolutely.
talking about before. And this is a political, area. And when Onome and I were talking about actually Onome being on the panel, you were kind of sharing your perspective on social change and where you come from, which is slightly different. Would you want to talk about that?
Sure. Well, in the United States, the actual phrase social change is often framed as being synonymous with social justice, with policy change. And while there is a lot of overlap, I don't necessarily see them as one and the same. Social change for me is much more nuanced. Social change for me is about how people relate to themselves and each other across all ideological spectra. I have had singing circles with people who who I later discovered were on very opposite sides of, insert highly polarizing political polarity here. And if we had started from the standpoint of like, these are the ideas that I hold dear, these are the ideas that I identify with, and anyone who doesn't identify with these ideas, like, I don't want to sing with you. It'd be much harder to sing together versus starting from the place of breath and body and nervous system and your story, and understanding that your story is not the story, but your story is part of a larger mosaic. And within that larger mosaic, there may be tiles that clash if they're like placed right next to each other. But within a bigger picture, that bigger mosaic, like there's room for everything. There's room for everyone. And one of the biggest turning points for me in that idea of social change was I had a one-on-one client. So I do some like vocal life coaching online. And I had a client who, she's a Black American woman and lovely, beautiful voice. Somewhere along the way, I discovered she was an ardent Trump supporter. And I was shocked at the time because I didn't know people like her really existed. But then in continuing to work with her, it really opened my eyes to this idea that, one, it doesn't behoove us to assume anything about any of each other's lives, what we care about, what we value. When we create a circle together, what matters in that moment is actually being together, having the experience, which is why I love so much what you said about the experiential aspect of this. When you sing and open your heart to somebody and then have a political conversation afterwards, like the texture of it is so different when you have that heart opening experience first versus starting from the head, starting from that fixed idea, fixed mindset kind of thing. Yeah.
And that fixed mindset is also ourself, right? Mm-hmm. And that self can also be in the way, if that is the starting point. Yes. I would just like to ask Guillermo, yes, about collective emotion actually and collectivity. So this intersection, in this work, and how do we inspire that? What is the way to that place of singing a collective emotion, singing collectivity? Because I know you have many thoughts on it.
I was thinking about free improv and what was spoken about free improv and how, regardless of how we see it musically, it's very clear that emerged in reaction, in response to the establishment, to the education, to classical music, to the, male, patriarchal, colonial, there's a rebelliousness to it. We are gonna do something which is not nice. You are not gonna, it's not gonna please you. And how different it is to almost, perhaps not even challenge, but to stir the roots of some of this disease of society from underneath and from below, and to say, okay, but all these illnesses of society appeared probably in the last 1,000 years at most. So what about the previous, 30,000 years of human evolution where people were hanging together and singing together? And what is it that they shared? And what is the purpose of the vocal apparatus and singing as a mode for personal expression and communication? And how it is for a group of people to be together and to sound together their feelings, their experiences in response to what happens outside of themselves in the environment, like the seasons, or what happens within a community, like grief, birth, celebration. How is it for people to choose to reimagine that we have in our cellular memory the capacity to express these feelings together, and how this can perhaps be not an antidote, but a way to find belonging without searching for it. Again, coming from underneath. So not fitting in, but in my own way, whatever my personal experience is, there's something larger than me that is shared. So I'm interested in this shared thing that was before history became so, I suppose, goal-oriented, male-based, etc., etc., etc.
Just before we go to question, just a devil's advocate inquiry, obviously about, idealizing the past and really understanding that obviously even back then it was not so peaceful, right? So how do we deal with that conundrum of, well, in some ways, I guess, are we the most free now? I mean, it's a question. Are we the most free? Are we the most peaceful? How do we consider this going back without idealizing the past, whatever it is, if we go 40 years or if we go 2,000 years?
Speak to that. So this notion of time, linear time, wobbly time. I think both things can be true. Multiple things can be true at the same time. There are very specific touchstones in our collective memory. And when I say collective memory, I mean what has been written down and not burned in the past 1,000 years or so. Like enough for us to be able to research and Google it. Within that collective memory is a meta-narrative of like, yes, forward progress. This group of people didn't have the right to do this thing, but then they got the right, that is progress. So there's that kind of forward momentum. These people never hung out together before, now they do hang out, forward progress. And also, there's this other, I believe, this other relationship to time that is more fractal, where everything that always was still is, that may just change form a little bit, kind of like a circle song. The tempo may change, the rhythm, the rhythm that's popular in the moment could change from era to era, but there's always some kind of music, there's always some kind of group dynamic, there's always, this group of people, that group of people who relate to each other and from their shadow nature, and then you come back to the light, and then the shadow comes again, just like every day the sun comes and goes. So there's a cyclical nature to social change. What's that theory before the turnings? Well, that's a whole other conversation. But yeah, it's cyclical. There's this notion of like the turnings, like different. Look it up. There's a lot of books on that, about how certain historical patterns repeat themselves. And then there's the fractal nature of things in terms of how, like the equivalent of some aspect of political hierarchy that exists in 2024. There was some version of it in like 200 AD. May have been a different name, may have been from a different culture, but they're echoes across time. So in that sense, I feel like it's all of it is true at the same time. And because being human is such an interesting phenomenon, because we have our 80, 90, 100, hopefully, years of our physical being, and then we have whatever localized memory from our parents, grandparents, however far you can go back as far as direct knowledge passed down to you, and then maybe your kids and grandkids. But like within that span, things can feel very linear to us. But again, there's that bigger picture, fractal time, that we don't necessarily always fully grasp or understand within our limited personal memory. Our personal memory feels very linear. That makes sense? Yeah.
Okay. I think you spoke also about the universality of it, and also the universality of the musical language. And I would say that that experience that you just mentioned, I think that's how improvisation feels. Because when you're improvising, you're exiting linear time in many ways. So I think we all know that it does feel, it's definitely not linear. There's definitely something else going on. And I think we access that, and through that we access other things, like collective emotion and those memories and experiences that go past the memory, as you were saying, that we know of from our.
Yeah, I think Onome responded to a lot of what I was going to say from a completely different angle. But what the word that comes to mind is knowingness, and not something that was in the chronological past, but more in our something that we know because we have lived it as a species, and it's not important to define the timing of it, but ancestral perhaps is a better word. So when I think of decolonization, I think of what I have been taught as a Latin American man, born of European people who were grown in a certain way in Europe, and all of that is kind of irrelevant. There's a level of my humanity which is much more universal, and for me, part of what interests me about improvisation is this universality, that it explores what we share and how we exchange it between each other through our bodies. I'm really interested in those exchanges. And when coming back to Tiziana's question and this thing about education, what comes to mind is something that goes both ways. It's like, how to put this into language? We're a very small group of people doing something quite niche, but almost if some of those seeds could be planted like guerrilla in how it is, what is valued when somebody goes to study something. What is it that you are trying to achieve? Is it about the objectives or the quality of the process? Is it about what's happening in the room in that moment? When somebody goes to study singing, are they working on who are they singing for or to, or who are they singing with? So there's some very kind of small distinctions that could change things. And I think the beauty of learning with the body is that whatever we experience together when we learn, we take it out and it seeps out.
Thank you. Let's open the floor to questions. I think there were some already before, so if they're still present, and we have one mic now, so I might be walking around a little bit more.
More of an observation to make than a question. The people who first domesticated the horse in prehistory, so this is the Middle Stone Age, systematically moved across Europe and killed every single male hunter-gatherer and Neolithic farmer. The women in this room are the descendants of females who are from the hunter-gatherer and Neolithic population, who were almost certainly enslaved. And the men in Europe have a very small range of genes which come from somewhere near the Black Sea. So I'd just like to say, I really celebrate that we can be here together. And let's not imagine that the world was somehow a beautiful place. Virtually every Stone Age and Bronze Age skeleton that we have dug up suffered a horrible death, and many of them have wounds from battles which have healed. So actually, our Stone Age ancestors the men were probably fighting most of the time. And the women had to put up with whoever won the battle. So let's enjoy today being here in peace.
But also, just to clarify, from my perspective, there was no idealization of the past, but more a sense that probably the voice was one of the things that allowed people to survive. If anything, just to keep warm in the cave when the light went out, when it was winter, and there was no more fire, to keep the metabolism going. So I'm talking more about that, the beautiful bonds of joy and peace between the noble savages and blah, 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 blah.
The voice is a constant.
The better angels of our nature.
The book I mentioned before, I don't remember the author's name, but the book is called The Fourth Turning.
Okay, on to the next question, if we have it.
Fourth turn.
Yes.
You go into schools and work with young people. How will you deal with their vulnerability through CBI?
When you say young, what do you mean? Higher education. So, higher education, yeah. No, universities. Yeah, and sometimes I have this question, like, why? It's just because what you said earlier on, like people are saying, yeah, because, with kids, like they love to improvise and they love to, and I have the sense that when we grow up as an adult, like we feel like we're losing this. We're losing this. And that's why I would love to do this in universities, where we already have this back, like, all this training, all this like school system operating, and having that space there, just because also in universities, we spend so much time in our brain, that I was like, we need more space to just activate our bodies and just to be like, and experience as I said, the music, instead of just trying to find because I feel sometimes like the way it is taught, like I feel sometimes like we are searching for our own place all the time and being like, oh, I need a job, because it's always about, and I feel that sometimes, we're missing this opportunity to connect with ourselves, as I said, to connect with the collective. But I'm not a specialist in like with the young people, but I'm pretty sure that of course it will be valuable as well. There's no question about that. But I'm focusing more on the university level.
I would, just to pass on to the next person.
Hi, I have a very practical question to you, because you're posing to translate this into universities, and I really like the idea that it would be open to all courses. So it's something that transcends the departments. But sort of from my own experience, having studied jazz and having been exposed to some improvisation that was cross departments, as in it was combining dancers and fine artists and musicians in an improvisational setting, I found that only very few people picked up on that opportunity. And so I guess the same as with vocal improvisation in our general settings, we have this issue of introducing people to the idea and getting them through the door in order to even offer this beautiful thing that we value. So have you got any practical ideas about this already? How you could do the outreach within the university? How do you get the engineer to come and be part of it?
Yeah, it's a very good question. The thing is, to me, if it's presented as an elective, I would love this to be like part of because when we have, for example, when I do this PhD, we have elective courses that we can choose, and we have kind of a list of, like topics that could be very like valuable for our research or whatever. And I would love this to be listed in kind of being like, kind of the import, because that's interesting, because I have this question from a committee member who said, why don't you just do workshops? And you offer workshops. instead of creating a course that is already in a busy curriculum. And she said clearly, like, we're not going to change the system. That's what she said. And so it's a very, because I wanted this to be like a course, a required course in the curriculum. That's what I want deep inside. But again, I don't want to be a dictator. So I'm just sort of like, well, why don't you be like an elected? But it's a very, very good question. And my sense is that if we reach a broader number of people, we increase the chance to have more people in the course. But again, the problem is that with departments, I read recently in a book the fact that financially, for example, if a student want to study with for example, with a teacher, but the teacher is not in their department, they won't have it won't be like included in their courses because it's not the same department. So again, it's I would love this, but the problem is that already with the system, the way it is done, it's already complicated just to set this up before having people coming. So I'm still trying to find a way to make this happen, and then finding ways to convince them to come. But I have no guarantee on that.
One thing that has come up a lot in the world of circle singing and vocal improvisation in the States, and I'm thinking it might be something similar here, when it comes to what I call the normies, the people who wouldn't necessarily even know a room like this exists, if they just happen to stumble upon a class or workshop and then they take it and they're like, oh my gosh, this is life-changing. This is something I didn't even know I needed. That is something I hear a lot because it's ineffable. It can seem like the results are intangible. They're very much tangible in who you become, how it grows you, how it opens you up and your confidence, and the marketing perspective, finding the language to articulate the value of this work is an ongoing challenge. I could even see something like, that bureaucrat who's like, I don't see the value in this, and we have our system and we're set in our ways, like inviting that person to a circle song, inviting the stakeholders and the gatekeepers, the academic gatekeepers, to actually have this kind of experience. And once they understand, like, oh my gosh, yeah, this needs to be in every household.
Actually, it's really what happened to me in Virginia. Like I hosted like a 1 week workshop, and at the end I have like professors coming so we did a kind of a performance-ish just to show what it was. And I couldn't expect what happened after that. Like they asked me to teach in the classes, like in music therapy, music education. They asked me to come to the music therapy symposium to do like a huge circle song, like 100 people. And
you were a student. So
I was a student. Yeah, of course. Yeah, they love that. I'm doing a PhD. I know what I mean. It's so I'm always starting from a positive place, an optimistic place of being like, so it can happen. Because in that, what I experienced myself in Virginia was just totally unexpected. But I really saw and sensed, that's why I'm doing this. I sensed the need of it. And I sense that there is a momentum right now. I don't know how to explain that. That's my intuition.
You spoke about universities and how to spread it across. The word that came to mind is how many students are not doing very well in their mental health, and whether the well-being area will be a way to invite people from different walks to come together and to say, okay, this is for you. It's for you to change the way you are in your head, in your body, to reset yourself. I mean, and I've always avoided to promote my work with improv and to put kind of wellness in the marketing, because I thought it was very nice that people found out without searching for it. But I'm beginning to think that to affect a corporate world or the education world, that might be a way in. And my little experience is with school teachers and how when they came to learn techniques of improvisation, they just say they felt a lot happier with themselves and that could converse with each other in a better way. So.
And also, I think this speaks to the need for us to be connected, because, as we said, there's a very big difference between people doing workshops and just being in their own little bubble, right? And this idea of connecting and sharing, because that's what's necessary to take that to understand a little bit more about, which words do we use, what are different ways into different spaces. So hopefully it also encourages us all to think in that way and to see the real value of that and how much the change can actually be amplified, and how it is a paradigm shift from just people stumbling onto vocal improvisation and then saying, wow, what would be a more proactive, way into that process. Yeah, so there are quite a lot of questions and not that much time left. So I would say that when you think about the questions from now onwards, just think about concluding the conversation because we have opened up a lot of topics. So just a little note, that we and going into that direction because we want to end, yes, the thread.
Thank you. Oh, hello. What's coming up really strong for me, and I
I think the mic is dying. Is the mic dying?
What's coming up really strongly for me in terms of this question of how challenging it can be to get people on board, right? As adults, the small number of people that might sign up to such courses at the university, and people realizing that it's something that they didn't know that they needed, right? And I would maybe say that I'm going to guess that most of us maybe came across this practice in our adult lives, right? So what's really coming to me is the question of how important it is to bring it to children. And I know that Kate's doing amazing work with that and Tiziana as well, but how I've only worked with adults in this. And I think that's a whole symposium in itself, right? Bringing this into schools, etc.
And just to say that Rhiannon is doing a symposium with teachers in Omega this autumn. So have a look on her website and kind of engage with that conversation as well. I think we're gonna let go of the mics and just finish acoustically. It's the only thing
Actually, the Zoom really needs the mic.
yeah, but they're not working anymore. So what we're gonna do is
Technology. Where's the eye?
okay. So hopefully they're still gonna hear us.
Should I plug this up?
No, same thing. Oh, we can just for aesthetics. Okay. So yes, we want to answer the questions and conclude together. So, Alistair.
Yeah, I just wanted to talk about the accessibility, and I'm going to actually perhaps musicians who want to also perhaps for people who just want to express themselves. And it gives you, because in Rozenthuler you accept any sound. I used to go and have ideas. I wanted to work with my agility as a singer, but I just moaned for 7 minutes. And giving the opportunity of people to express themselves, rather than there, rather than go, there's got to be some vocal improvisation. So let's just give people the opportunity to express themselves in a simple way, and then you can move on from there.
Sorry, a little. We have a request if you could repeat the questions or the comments from the audience so that they can hear.
Yeah, I think people on Zoom might not be able to hear everything.
Maybe just a
I'm just
brief
gonna kind of summarize that it was about really allowing people just to express first and how important that is before we even get into the improvising. A place where every sound is welcomed and how that can be a starting point and then you move on from there. Kate.
Hi.
Exactly.
I feel as a facilitator of these spaces, I don't say this at the beginning, but often it comes up just in discussion or reflection after holding the space, that this kind of work is radically political, and that we're holding spaces of non-hierarchy where people's voices can be heard. Countless people come to me saying, I was told I could not sing, I was told I'm not allowed to be who I am in my body. And holding these spaces is personal, but it's also about breaking down these systems of oppression and reimagining these spaces where we can find new ways of combining that allow people to be seen, allow people to be heard, allow us to explore how we are interacting, and that is so deeply political, this work. So I think it's a really important play space for us to see how we can change these spaces, the actual work that's happening in the room together.
In real time.
In real time. Yeah. And to summarize for Zoom, Kate was saying how deeply political this word is, this work is, and how what actually happens, the agency that people come in, how different that is towards systems of oppression that we live in. And I think that realization is important because, yes, it's great that we're doing it. It's great that we're enjoying it. It's great that we are changing ourselves. But I think we can do more with that. And I think we can talk about it in different ways and take it out in different ways.
The way people share of themselves, in writing, in social media, in communicating with others, and how much value there would be in each one of us, just sharing a bit more our reflections of how this makes us feel.
But also just to finish, because this is such a political space, it is also threatening. And hence why people who control or want to understand everything that they want to know what's going on in these spaces, it's difficult to get people on board.
Yeah.
Because it is a space of potential chaos.
And at the risk of stating what might be obvious to me, I don't know if it's obvious to everyone here. So I'm someone who's led circles in prisons and detention facilities and churches and community centers. Question for the facilitators in this room. Have you all facilitated in a wide variety of spaces with a wide variety of populations? Okay, it's not just like the niche group in the woods and the retreat centers. Okay, so just wanted to check in about that.
Actually, very often much easier to start off, even if you don't call it like singing, but this kind of improvisation culture in other places than in Europe. I've done a lot of work in Senegal and Sierra Leone with the street youth. You just straight go on because they used to singing together, used to doing used to dancing. I always combine it all together, even before I knew it's called like the singing. I love dancing, I love percussion, I love singing, I love making music. So it's for me, it was just like, yeah, that's what you do. And I find that when you come here, you throw them to Walmart, you get them unblocked, you get them allow themselves to be silly, to allow themselves to make all kinds of noises. Then you go to other classes, and like, bam, we're in the zone, and even prisons, and like, so I think this, when you said about the privilege thing, I'm not sure, I think it's maybe also a definition. You don't have to necessarily call it certain singing, but they're doing this free improv expression of themselves, of their story, and I came across it in many places, even if you know this community also, so I'm not sure, where is the, and how can you all bring these actually together?
I'd just like to agree and say I think we are both right as human beings. Our nervous system belongs to the earth. We are part of the earth. We are part of the animal kingdom. We evolved as mammals, as primates. We have this kinship. We have separation sickness, and the work of music is the work of healing. And you are all healers. And there's a fork in the road because there's the marketplace, and there's the bottom line, and there's the balance. But there's also your love and your song. And thank you for beautiful event.
That's a nice conclusion.
Thank you.
And on that note, let's just finish by singing, closing our eyes if we would like to, maybe starting from one note, but definitely simplicity and allowing for a free piece that's going to conclude.
Wait,
Exactly, all sounds are welcome.
Omega, the water bottle.
The water bottle song.
Oh. 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 Thank you very much. And just to conclude, if it's okay to do 2 claps together, just to let it go into the space. 2 claps all together. Let everything go before we just experience.